Well, they could decide that they want to do that, but that's going to incur much more hurt on Russia itself than actually on European countries. Russia desperately needs to sell its natural resources like natural gas in order to get access to the foreign exchange that it needs to prop up its currency. So if they decide that this has to be paid in rubles, they can make these types of threats. But really, when we think about this relationship, this could cause some hurt to the European countries. You have countries like Germany that 30 to 40% of their natural gas comes from Russia. They will find alternative ways around this. This is really what's going to hurt Russia much more. And really, it's only these natural resource exports like gas and oil that have been keeping Russia afloat.
Meanwhile, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov says progress has been made in peace talks with Ukraine. They're about to go into another round of peace talks. What's the latest?
Well, the information coming out of Lavrov is very different than what the Russians are doing on the ground. There is a disconnect there. He has always been saying things like they weren't even going to invade, that the idea of an invasion was ludicrous. And so I think he's presenting a much more optimistic view of what's taking place. I'm not particularly optimistic in the moment that there's going to be much that can happen in terms of peace talks, because the brutality of the conflict has been terrible, and the other issue is that there's just irreconcilable differences here. I don't think that Putin is going to be satisfied with Ukraine just being neutral. It's clear that he wants to control the whole country, or at least big chunks of the east. And that would not be acceptable on the Ukrainian side, particularly because we're at the point in the conflict where it's almost a stalemate, where Russia troops have performed really poorly, where it's not clear that they can even win this conflict. And so why would the Ukrainians want to give in this early? Plus, what the Russians say they're going to do, what Putin says he's going to do, he ends up doing the opposite. So it's very difficult to place much trust in this peace-building process.
Well, Sergei Lavrov has also praised India for not being one-sided. What do you make of these efforts to shore up support in Asia?
Well, they have to do this. The Russians have to get some kind of support from other countries because they are otherwise completely isolated. I mean, they're really dependent on China. And thus far, China has been somewhat supportive, although some of that support is waning as they've seen the atrocities of the conflict. We think that the Chinese may be willing to support Russia militarily in secret, but they're not willing to go above and beyond that, because that poses huge risks to them, because the U.S. has made it very clear that if China gets involved, that there will be serious repercussions for the Chinese. Now, the Indians have been more neutral, and just even being neutral is a benefit to the Russians at this stage, because they see themselves as increasingly encircled by countries, some in Asia, like in Japan, in South Korea, that do not want to cooperate and in fact are being very active in employing more sanctions.
Now, Russia says it's making gains around the city of Kherson, but this is yet to be confirmed by Ukraine. What's the latest on the state of the offensive at the moment?
Well, if we're talking about the state of the offensive in the entire Ukrainian conflict, you see that it has become more of a stalemate, as I mentioned, that there were Russian gains that the Ukrainians have gained back. Areas that it appeared to be under Russian control, the Ukrainians have been able to gain more control over. So a lot of the gains that happened early on, and I need to emphasize, there weren't that many gains for the Russians. I mean, some gains in the south, some gains in the east, but they haven't been able to really push into Kyiv, of course, and in fact, they've been pushed back even further. So things are not looking good for the Russians in terms of the way the military confrontation is unfolding. And in fact, we had one of the first reports of Ukraine going into Russian territory. So I'm wondering if this could even spill over into Russian territory and see the Ukrainians fighting elsewhere.
And a plan for further evacuations from the besieged city of Mariupol has been approved. How soon do you think these people can be brought to safety?
So there's reports that there are buses taking people out of Mariupol after weeks of being under siege, having no access to the outside world, no running water, little access to food. So this was a dire humanitarian crisis. And the reports are that thousands are leaving via bus and that this hopefully is going safely for them because this was one of the cities that was hardest hit. And ironically, it is also one of the cities that has some of the biggest population of ethnic Russians, not just Russian-speaking Ukrainians. So one of the cities that had been hit the hardest is being attacked by their own co-ethnic Russians.